Ethan Cole lived far away from the busy cities of the galaxy. His home stood alone on the edge of a red desert under two suns that burned the sky like fire. He had chosen this quiet planet after the war ended. He wanted peace, silence, and distance from every living soul. For years he had stayed alone in his outpost. Just a man, some machines, and old memories that refused to die. But loneliness had a way of eating into him. His body was strong, but his mind grew tired. One day his helper drone broke down and he had no one to cook or clean. He could survive on ration packs, but he was tired of the metallic taste. So, for the first time in 5 years, Ethan placed a hiring notice on the local channel. Help wanted. Cook needed. Must live on site. No questions. He didn't expect anyone to answer. Most people feared him, the war hero who had vanished after the battles. But the next evening, a message appeared. I can cook. I have a child. We only need a small room, please. The sender's name was Riva, and her file showed she wasn't human. Her species, the Valari, were tall and thin, with pale gray skin and silver hair. During the war, they had been enemies. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Hiring her would be trouble. People would talk. But something in her words, I have a child, made him pause. Maybe it was pity, or maybe it was guilt. He finally replied, come tomorrow. If you can cook, you can stay. The next day, a small transport landed near his outpost. From it stepped a woman in a worn cloak, holding a small bundle close to her chest. Ethan watched from the doorway. Her movements were careful, like someone who had known fear too long. I'm Reva, she said softly. Her voice was low, musical, almost fragile. Ethan nodded and moved aside. Kitchen's that way. Your room's behind it. She looked around the metal halls, the blinking panels, the smell of old machinery. Her eyes flicked toward the walls, scarred with laser marks from a past life. She didn't ask about them. She didn't ask about him. By evening, the smell of real food filled the outpost for the first time in years. Simple stew, warm bread, and a hint of herbs. Ethan sat at the table watching her work in silence. Her hands moved with quiet grace. She never looked him in the eyes. The child, still wrapped in a small blanket, lay sleeping in a basket beside her. Ethan cleared his throat. Boy or girl? Riva hesitated. Boy. What's his name? She hesitated longer this time. Turn, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Quiet one. Riva gave a faint smile. He sleeps well. That was the end of their talk. They worked and ate in silence. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he had sat at a table with anyone else. The warmth of real food almost felt wrong. When he went to bed, he tried not to think about the woman and her child. He told himself they were just workers. Nothing more. But deep down, something small began to stir. A memory of laughter, of small hands tugging at his sleeve. He pushed it away. He didn't want to remember. Late that night, Ethan woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in years. A song. It floated softly through the hall, strange, slow, and beautiful. It wasn't in any language he knew. He followed it quietly to the kitchen. The lights were dim, and Riva sat in a chair rocking her baby. Her eyes were half closed as she sang. The melody made the machines hum faintly like they were listening too. The air shimmered slightly, filled with quiet peace. Ethan stood in the shadows, unable to move. The song reminded him of something from before the war, before the pain. His throat tightened, then the baby moved. The blanket slipped from his face. Ethan saw his eyes. They glowed faint blue, soft at first, then brighter. Not like any normal light. It was as if tiny stars lived inside them, spinning and pulsing gently. Ethan froze. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He had seen those eyes before, long ago in a place no one was supposed to remember. He stepped back slowly, afraid to make a sound. His heart beat hard in his chest. Riva didn't notice him. She kept singing, her voice tender and sad. Ethan whispered to himself, barely breathing. Those eyes, they shouldn't exist. He turned and walked back to his room, the sound of her lullaby following him like a ghost. For the rest of the night, he didn't sleep. He just sat there staring at the wall, seeing those glowing blue eyes again and again. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the man who had survived every battle, felt something close to fear. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The glow of those eyes stayed burned into his mind. They weren't just strange, they were familiar. He had seen them once before, years ago, behind a thick wall of glass and bright white lights. deep inside a secret military lab. Back then, those eyes belonged to something that wasn't supposed to live. When the morning suns rose over the red desert, Ethan sat at the table staring at his untouched coffee. The smell of breakfast drifted from the kitchen. Real food, not rations, but his stomach turned. Riva moved quietly, the baby strapped to her back in a cloth sling. She spoke little, as always. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly when she passed him a plate. He noticed. He also noticed that the baby wasn't looking at him this time. His tiny face was hidden, covered with a soft hood. Ethan cleared his throat. Didn't sleep much. Riva glanced up. The nights are loud on this planet, she said simply. He looked at her, studying her face. What did you mean last night in your song? The words, what language was that? Riva hesitated, then said softly, Valari cradle song. It means, sleep under the stars. The sky remembers you. The sky remembers, Ethan repeated. That's poetic. She smiled faintly, but her eyes held sadness. On my world we sing to remind the young that the universe watches over them, even when no one else does. Ethan felt something twist inside him. No one else does. The words hit too close. He had once said the same thing to his daughter before the war took her away. He pushed the memory down and forced himself to eat. But the food tasted like dust. After breakfast, he went to the supply shed to work on his old rover. He needed something to keep his mind busy. The machines were old, full of sand and rust, but fixing them was easier than thinking. Still, his thoughts betrayed him. Those eyes. That color wasn't natural. He remembered being inside Lab 9, a black site facility orbiting Vega Prime. The scientists there had been experimenting with alien DNA, mixing it with human. They called it Project Seraph. The goal was to create hybrids strong enough to survive radiation and fight without fear. He had been one of the soldiers assigned to guard the project. What he saw there haunted him, children with glowing eyes crying behind glass. None of them were supposed to survive. The project was shut down after the lab burned. Everyone said the test subjects were dead. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. No, he muttered. That can't be. That was 20 years ago. But deep down he knew the truth. Those eyes were the same. That evening, Riva was in the garden dome cutting herbs. Ethan walked in quietly, but she noticed him right away. Her people always noticed. You came here to hide, she said suddenly without turning around. Ethan stopped. What makes you say that? She looked over her shoulder. I know the look. I've seen it in others who survived the war. The ones who lost too much. Her tone was gentle, not accusing. He didn't reply. He just stared at the small baby sleeping beside the herb bed. Its tiny hand glowed faintly under the sun's blue veins pulsing with light. Riva, he said finally. Your child. Those eyes. They're not normal, are they? Her back stiffened. He's just a child. I've seen that light before. Her lips tightened. You've seen too much. The air between them grew tense. Ethan took a step forward, lowering his voice. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need to know what he is. If someone finds out, they'll come here. They won't stop. Her eyes glimmered wetly in the dim light. You think I don't know that? She whispered. We've been running since he was born. From soldiers, from bounty hunters, from those who call him cursed. They say he's a mistake of science. Ethan froze. A mistake of science. The phrase echoed from his memories. Exactly what the scientists in Lab 9 used to say. Project Seraph, he muttered. You don't even know what he is, do you? Riva looked away. I don't care what they made him from. He's my son. Ethan stared at her for a long time. There was no fear in her eyes now, only fire. And suddenly he understood. She wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. He turned toward the window, watching the orange dusk fall over the desert. If anyone comes looking, he said quietly, you stay inside. No one needs to know he's here. Riva's voice softened. Why would you help us? Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. Because once I couldn't save my own child. Silence filled the room. The baby stirred, making a small cooing sound. His eyes opened, two small orbs of blue light that reflected the fading suns. Ethan felt something strange. Pain. Yes, but also warmth, something buried for years. Maybe the child wasn't just a reminder of what he'd lost. Maybe he was a second chance. That night, Ethan wrote in his old war journal, something he hadn't done in years. The boy's eyes remember things the universe tried to forget. And somehow, So do I. He closed the book, sat back, and stared into the endless desert sky. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt alive. 3 days passed, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching the outpost. He had lived with danger long enough to trust his instincts. Every night he checked the radar twice. Every morning he walked the perimeter with his old rifle. The desert was quiet, but too quiet. Reva noticed his unease. She didn't ask questions, but her eyes followed him wherever he went. She kept her son close, always wrapped in a soft gray blanket that glowed faintly when the suns hit it. Ethan never saw the baby's eyes again, but he could feel their presence like a memory pressing against his thoughts. He told himself to stop thinking about it. But the human mind wasn't built to forget. That evening, the lights in the workshop flickered for the first time. At first, Ethan thought it was a power surge. Then his mechanical arm, an old war prosthetic, suddenly twitched and sparked. He cursed, slamming the control switch, but the arm moved again, as if something unseen was pulling its wires. "Damn thing's haunted," he muttered. From the kitchen, Reva called out, "Is everything all right?" "Yeah," Ethan lied. "Just the circuits acting up." But deep down, he knew the truth. The arm had been stable for years. It only reacted that way when he'd walked near the baby's cradle earlier that morning. That same strange pulse, the faint vibration in the air, had returned. He went to his quarters and pulled out his old military tablet. Its screen still cracked from the war. It had one thing he never deleted, a copy of his classified mission logs. He hadn't opened them in years. But now, he typed in the password with a shaking hand. File, Project Seraph. Final record lines of cold text filled the screen. The words brought back the smell of smoke, metal, and blood. Objective: merge human and Volari genetic material to create hybrid soldiers capable of controlling machines through neural resonance. Ethan scrolled faster, heart pounding. He saw old reports, test results, and photos. Images of children with glowing blue eyes sitting in sterile white rooms. Then one line stopped him cold. Subject 17 survived termination protocol. Location unknown, his breath caught. Subject 17, he remembered that number. A small child, maybe 3 years old, who had reached for him through the glass. The boy's eyes had glowed like tiny stars. Ethan had turned away. A week later, the lab exploded. Everyone assumed the children were dead. Now, years later, another blue-eyed child lived under his roof. Was it possible? Could Reva's baby be the last remnant of that nightmare? The next morning, Ethan confronted her. He found Reva in the garden dome watering the green sprouts. The air smelled of damp earth and metal. "Reva," he said quietly. "I read the old reports." She froze but didn't turn around. "Reports?" "From the war. About Project Seraph." Her hand tightened around the watering can. Water spilled onto the floor. "I know what your child is," Ethan continued. "Or at least what they made him to be." She turned slowly, her silver hair glinting in the sunlight. "And what do you think that is?" "Something that can control machines. With his mind." Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment she looked terrified. But then she spoke in a whisper. "He doesn't understand what he is. He was born sick. Machines react to him, they always have. I thought it was because he's different. But now I see it's because of them." "Them?" Ethan asked. "The ones who did this, the ones who used people like experiments. You call them scientists. I call them butchers." Ethan said nothing. He couldn't defend what he had once protected. She stepped closer. "Do you know what it's like to hold your child and see soldiers chasing you because of what he was born as?" He looked at her hands. They were trembling. "No," he said softly. "But I know what it's like to lose one." For the first time, her hard expression softened. A quiet silence grew between them. Outside, the red sands shimmered like waves under the suns. That night, Ethan dreamed again of the war. Flames, alarms, children crying behind glass. He saw Subject 17 reaching for him, small fingers pressed against the barrier. "Help me." He woke up in sweat, his chest tight. The power flickered again. The lights dimmed, then flared. A low hum filled the outpost, soft at first, then stronger. Machines began to turn on by themselves. Screens flickered with strange blue symbols. The air vibrated like it was alive. Ethan ran to the control room. "Reva," he shouted. She appeared, holding the baby, her eyes wide.
"He's frightened,"
she cried. The baby's eyes glowed brighter and brighter. The machines answered. Ethan's metal arm lifted on its own. The control panels lit up in chaos. "Make it stop," Ethan yelled. Riva tried to calm the baby, whispering softly. "It's all right, Turn, you're safe." Slowly, the glow faded. The hum stopped. The lights returned to normal. Ethan stood frozen, his heart hammering. The air smelled of ozone and heat. He looked at Riva, at the child who had just shut down half his systems with a thought. "I don't think he's sick," Ethan said quietly. "I think he's evolving." Riva looked down at her son, then at Ethan. "Then we must protect him, because when the world finds out, they'll come for him." Ethan nodded grimly. "They always do." That night, the stars burned cold above the desert. Ethan sat by the window, watching the darkness stretch forever. For the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by guilt. He was haunted by possibility. The child was no longer a secret of the past. He was the shadow of the future. The morning was too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving across the desert. Ethan felt the silence before he saw the shadows. A silver patrol ship cut through the orange sky, its engines humming like thunder. It circled once, then descended slowly toward the outpost. Dust rose in thick clouds as the landing gear touched the sand. Ethan stood at the door, his rifle hanging loosely by his side. Riva appeared behind him, holding Turn close to her chest. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Don't speak," Ethan whispered. "No matter what they ask." "Let me handle it." The ship's ramp opened with a hiss. 2 Galactic Alliance officers stepped out. 1 human, 1 android. Their uniforms were polished, their faces unreadable. The human, a tall man with sharp blue eyes, nodded stiffly. "Captain Ethan Cole, we didn't expect to find you out here." Ethan didn't move. "I didn't expect company." The android's voice was cold and smooth. "Routine check, Captain. There have been reports of unregistered life forms settling on border planets. We're tracking an alien female with a child." Ethan's chest tightened. "You think I'm running a refugee camp?" The android tilted its head. "Your record shows sympathy for non-human life forms since your resignation. We're just being cautious." Ethan forced a half smile. "Then look all you want. You won't find anyone here but me." The officers exchanged glances. The human stepped closer, his boots crunching the sand. "Permission to scan the premises." Ethan shrugged. "You don't need my permission. You've already decided you'll do it anyway." The man smirked. "Still sharp, Captain." He motioned to the android, which began scanning with a low hum, sweeping blue light across the walls. Ethan stood motionless, his heart pounding. Riva and Turn were hidden in the old storage tunnels beneath the kitchen, a space Ethan had used once to hide weapons during the war. He prayed it would be enough. Minutes crawled by. The android scanned every corner of the outpost, every machine, every vent. Then it paused near the floor panel that led to the tunnels. Ethan's hand tightened on his rifle, but just as the android leaned down, sparks flickered in its sensors. It twitched, then froze. The blue scanning beam vanished. "Unit malfunction," it said flatly. "System rebooting." Ethan kept his expression calm, but inside he knew exactly what had happened. Turn. The child's energy must have interfered again. "Your toy seems tired," Ethan said dryly. "You should buy a better model." The human officer glared but said nothing. "We'll report your location as clear for now," he said at last. "But if you see any unusual activity, you'll inform us immediately." Ethan nodded once. "Sure. I'll be sure to call if my plants start talking." They didn't laugh. The officers turned and boarded their ship. Within moments, the engines roared to life, and the patrol vessel lifted off, disappearing into the clouds. Only when the dust settled did Ethan let out the breath he'd been holding. He hurried to the storage hatch, lifted the panel, and climbed down. Riva sat on the cold floor, clutching Tyrn tightly. Her face was pale. "They're gone," Ethan said. "For now." She looked up, her voice shaking. "They'll come back." "They always come back," Ethan nodded grimly. "Then next time we'll be ready." Riva's eyes filled with tears. "You should have given us away," she said. "They'll hunt you now, too." Ethan's tone was hard. "I've been hunted before. Doesn't scare me anymore." She shook her head. "You don't understand. If they find him, they'll take him apart, to study him, to build more like him. The same way they destroyed my people." Ethan crouched beside her. "You think I don't know what they do? I was part of it once." Her gaze snapped to his face. "You?" He nodded slowly. "I guarded their labs. I watched them test your kind. I told myself I was following orders." He paused, voice low. But those eyes, the same eyes your boy has. I've seen them before. I saw what they did to those children. Riva's hand trembled. Then you know why we ran? Yes, Ethan said softly. And now I know why I can't let them find him. She looked at him for a long time, unsure whether to trust him. Then slowly she nodded. That night they sat together in the control room, lights dimmed, the baby sleeping between them. The desert wind howled outside, brushing dust against the metal walls. Riva broke the silence. Why did you really save us, Ethan? He stared into the dark. Because once I didn't. My daughter was taken during the war, evacuated by the same people who built those labs. I never found her. They said she died, but I never saw a body. Riva lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, Ethan sighed. You and that child. You reminded me of something I lost. Maybe this is my chance to make it right. Riva touched the edge of his metal arm gently. You don't have to fight for us, he gave a tired smile. It's all I know how to do. Later that night, when Riva and Tern were asleep, Ethan sat alone at the console. He replayed the patrol's message on his monitor. At the bottom, a faint data line caught his eye. Something the android had sent before it rebooted. It was a signal. A tracker. They knew. Ethan looked toward the sleeping child, the faint glow of blue under the blanket. He whispered to himself, They'll come back, and next time they won't ask questions. He switched off the lights and began preparing for war. The suns rose red that morning, too red, like the sky was warning of what was coming. Ethan hadn't slept. He had spent the whole night preparing the outpost for attack. His hands were steady, but his mind buzzed with restless thoughts. He loaded power cells, checked the perimeter defenses, and activated old turrets that hadn't fired in years. The hum of old machines filled the air like ghosts waking from a long sleep. Riva watched him quietly from the doorway, holding Tern in her arms. You think they'll come today? She asked softly. They know where we are, Ethan said. They'll come when they think I'm tired. That's how they work. She looked at the sky. I thought this planet was forgotten. Ethan gave a dry laugh. There's no such thing as forgotten, only delayed. He picked up his old rifle and glanced at the baby. Tern's eyes were closed, but his little hands glowed faint blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan didn't say it out loud, but he knew that light wasn't just pretty. It was a signal. Somewhere out there, someone was already watching for it. By noon, the air began to tremble, not from the wind, but from engines. Ethan stepped outside. 3 small attack drones appeared on the horizon, flying low and fast. Their bodies shone like steel insects under the twin suns. Inside, he shouted to Riva. She ran back into the outpost with Tern. Ethan took position on the roof and aimed his rifle. He fired once, and one drone burst in a flash of light, but the others split apart, circling wide. They began firing plasma bursts that scorched the walls. The outpost shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ethan reloaded quickly. Come on, you metal vultures, he growled. He fired again. One shot missed, another hit, tearing off a drone's wing. Then something slammed into the side of the outpost, a rocket. The explosion threw him backward. His rifle flew from his hands. He hit the roof hard, his metal arm sparking from the impact. He staggered to his feet, bleeding, dazed. Through the smoke, he saw Riva running out, holding her child tight. Get back, he yelled. But before she could move, a drone swooped down, aiming its cannon at her. She screamed and dropped to her knees, curling around Tern. The world froze for a heartbeat. Then the air changed. A strange vibration spread through the ground. The machines began to hum, their lights flickering. The drone above Riva suddenly stopped moving. Its rotors spun aimlessly. Its lights turned the same blue as Tern's eyes. Ethan stared in disbelief. No, it can't be. Riva looked down at her child. Tern's eyes were open now, glowing brighter than ever, 2 stars burning with emotion. His small fingers stretched toward the sky. The remaining drones turned their guns toward each other. They fired wildly, explosions lighting up the desert. One after another, they fell burning into the sand. The humming grew louder, like a song without words. Machines around the outpost powered down. Ethan's arm froze again, the lights on it blinking uncontrollably. Then silence. Ethan's knees hit the ground. His breathing came fast. He did that. Riva was shaking. She held Tern tightly, whispering, It's okay, my love, it's okay. But the child was trembling, his light flickering with confusion and fear. Ethan stepped closer, still in shock. Riva. He controlled them. She looked up at him, her eyes wet. He doesn't mean to. When he's afraid, the machines... They listen. Ethan swallowed hard. Listen. He commanded them. Riva shook her head. He's not a weapon. No, Ethan said quietly. He's something greater. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Ethan looked at the wreckage around them, the destroyed drones, the smoking sands. He knew what would happen next. The military would detect the loss of contact. More ships would come. Bigger ones. He turned to Riva. Pack what you can. We're leaving. Leave? She whispered. Where can we go? They're everywhere. Ethan tightened the straps on his rifle. I know a place. An old mine in the canyon 50 miles east. No satellites can scan it. We'll hide there until I figure out how to stop that signal of his. Riva hesitated. And if they find us? Ethan looked toward the sky where black smoke curled upward like a warning. Then we fight again. They moved quickly. Ethan loaded supplies into an old rover while Riva soothed Tern, who had fallen asleep again. But even asleep, his eyes glowed faintly beneath his eyelids. Ethan paused, looking at him. The child's power both amazed and frightened him. He wasn't sure if Tern was a miracle or a ticking bomb. As the suns began to set, the desert turned crimson. Ethan started the rover. The engine roared to life, and they drove into the endless dunes. For a long while, no one spoke. Then Riva broke the silence. You should have let them take us. You'd be safe. Ethan kept his eyes on the horizon. Safe doesn't mean right, she looked at him. You risked your life for us. Why? Ethan's voice was low. Because I helped build what they became. Maybe saving him will balance what I did. Riva turned toward the child, her fingers brushing the soft glow on his cheek. He didn't ask for this. I know, Ethan said. But he's the key to something. Something the galaxy's not ready for. She frowned. And what's that? Ethan looked at the endless stars beginning to appear in the dark sky. A future where fear doesn't rule creation. Behind them, far across the dunes, a signal blinked on the Alliance's radar screens. A brief flare of blue light before fading. They had seen it, and they were coming. Night fell fast in the red desert. The twin suns slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted with violet shadows and 1,000 quiet stars. The rover crawled over the rocky dunes, its headlights cutting through the dark. Ethan's face was pale in the dim light of the control panel. He hadn't spoken for an hour. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts were miles away, on the battle, on the destroyed drones, and on the power that had come from a frightened child. In the back seat, Riva cradled Tern close, whispering soft words in her language. The boy's glow had faded now, but Ethan could still feel a faint pulse in the air like static electricity. It was as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Finally, Riva broke the silence. You should leave us here, she said quietly. Go back. Tell them you didn't know. Ethan didn't answer. You don't have to die for us, she continued. You've done enough. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. You don't understand. They'll never believe that. They already know. The second those drones went down, every sensor in orbit would have lit up. So what happens now? She asked. Ethan looked out into the darkness. Now they come for us, and I have to decide whether to run or make a stand. They reached the canyon at dawn. It was deep and silent, a scar in the land carved by ancient rivers. Ethan parked the rover under a rock arch and helped Riva carry their supplies inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of iron. The old mining tunnels stretched for miles, dark, safe and invisible to most scanners. This will do, Ethan said, setting down a power lantern. They can't find us here easily. Riva looked around. It feels like a grave. Ethan gave a tired smile. Better a grave than a prison. She sat down on a rock, holding Tern close. He's still weak. Every time he uses his power, it drains him. Ethan crouched near her. He doesn't know how to control it yet. She nodded. He's just a child. He doesn't understand what fear does to him. Ethan stared at the boy for a long time. Fear makes machines obey him. Imagine what could happen if he learned to choose instead of react. Riva frowned. You sound like the scientists. He looked away. Maybe, but I'm not them. I'm not trying to use him, I'm trying to protect him. Hours passed. They ate quietly, listening to the wind outside. But peace never lasted long. Near sunset, Ethan's wrist monitor began to beep, a signal, faint but steady. He checked the radar screen and cursed under his breath. What is it? Riva asked quickly. They've found us, he said. A command cruiser just entered orbit, and there are dropships on the way. Her face went pale. How long? An hour, maybe less, she clutched Tyrion tighter. Ethan, we can't fight them. He stood, pulling his old armor from the bag. No, I can, Riva's voice trembled. You'll die, maybe, he said, loading his rifle. But it'll give you time to escape. She grabbed his arm. No, I won't run again. Every planet we run to, they follow. Every time we hide, they find us. We can't keep running. He turned to her. Then what do you suggest? Her eyes glistened with tears. Let them see him. Let them see what he really is, not a weapon, not an experiment. Maybe they'll understand. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You're asking me to trust them? I'm asking you to trust Hope, she said softly. Because fighting will only prove them right that he's dangerous. He wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Deep down, he knew she was right. The Alliance only feared what it didn't understand. Yet the soldier in him, the man built for survival, refused to surrender. He walked to the mouth of the cave and looked up at the burning sky. The first ships appeared, silver dots growing larger by the second. This is my choice, he said finally. I'll stand between them and the boy. If they have to go through me first, maybe they'll stop long enough to listen. Riva stepped beside him. Then I stand with you. Ethan gave a small, weary smile. You're stubborn, she smiled faintly. I learned from the best. The first dropship landed in a storm of dust and heat. Soldiers poured out, dozens of them, armored and armed, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. This is Commander Drax of the Galactic Alliance. You are harboring an unauthorized hybrid subject. Surrender the child immediately or face destruction. Ethan's voice echoed back across the canyon. You'll have to kill me first. There was a long pause. Then coldly the voice replied, As you wish. The soldiers advanced. Plasma fire lit up the canyon walls. Ethan moved like a ghost from his past, his rifle blazing, his armor sparking under fire. He fought with the strength of a man who had already died once. Riva hid deeper in the cave, clutching Tyrion close. The child began to cry, the glow in his eyes returning, brighter this time, pure blue light spilling over the walls. Shh, Riva whispered. Don't be afraid, but Tyrion wasn't afraid. He was angry, the air trembled. Rocks shook. The soldiers' weapons jammed. Drones fell from the sky like stones. The machines, all of them, stopped obeying their masters. And in the heart of that chaos, Ethan turned, eyes wide. Riva, he shouted. Get down! The canyon filled with blue light. When the glare faded, silence fell. Every soldier lay unconscious. Every weapon was dead. Only the wind moved. Ethan stood barely upright, staring at the small figure glowing in Riva's arms. He whispered, voice trembling. He didn't destroy them. He just stopped them. Riva looked at her son. He made a choice. Ethan sank to his knees. Then maybe there's still hope for us all. The canyon was silent after the storm. The smell of burnt metal hung in the air. Broken weapons lay scattered across the sand, still smoking. The soldiers of the Galactic Alliance were alive but unconscious, their machines cold and lifeless. Ethan stood in the middle of the destruction, breathing hard. His armor was cracked, his metal arm sparking, his face covered in dust and blood. He looked around in disbelief. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. The war that had begun in his nightmares had ended in silence. Riva walked toward him, holding Tyrion close. The child's glow had faded again. His small body was limp, sleeping peacefully as if nothing had happened. He's safe, she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his voice hoarse. Safe? Riva, he just stopped an army. She shook her head. No, Ethan, he didn't stop them. He stopped their hate. Ethan stared at the soldiers lying in the sand. They were breathing, but their weapons looked dead, drained of energy. His heart pounded as he realized what had happened. Tyrion hadn't destroyed anything. He had disconnected every machine from its programming, stripped them of the will to harm. The child had chosen peace. Hours passed before the soldiers began to wake. They looked around in confusion, their weapons useless in their hands. The Commander Drax rose slowly, helmet cracked, eyes full of shock. He saw Ethan and Riva standing above him. What did you do? He rasped. Ethan's voice was steady. I didn't do anything. He did. Drax's gaze shifted to the sleeping child. That thing. Ethan cut him off sharply. That child just saved your lives. You came to kill him and he spared you. Drax tried to speak, but his comm device sparked uselessly. All their tech was dead. The hum of the galaxy had gone quiet in this small place. Ethan looked down at the commander. Now you understand why you can't take him. The world isn't ready for him. Drax's expression hardened. You think you can hide forever? Ethan's voice softened. No, but maybe we can buy him enough time to grow. To understand who he is before the galaxy decides what he should be. Drax said nothing. He looked around at his helpless troops, at the silent drones, and then at the boy sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. There was fear in his eyes, but also something else. Wonder. By evening, Ethan led Riva and Tern back into the tunnels. He knew the Alliance would return one day, maybe with stronger weapons and colder hearts. But for now, they had peace. He sat near the tunnel's mouth, watching the fading sunset bleed across the desert sky. Riva sat beside him, silent, holding her child close. Do you think they'll understand? She asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. The galaxy never understands what it fears, she sighed. Then what now? Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly. Now we make sure he learns the one thing they never could, how to be human. Riva smiled softly. And how will he learn that? Ethan looked out at the stars. By watching us try. That night the air outside grew cold. The stars reflected off the sand like tiny blue lights. Riva slept with Tern in her arms, the soft glow of his eyes lighting the dark. Ethan sat nearby, repairing his arm with trembling fingers. He stopped suddenly when he saw his reflection in the metal. Tired eyes, scars, and the same haunted look he'd carried since the war. But something was different now. The emptiness was gone. There was something alive behind those eyes again. Something he thought he'd buried with his past. Hope. He whispered quietly to himself. You did it, kid. You woke something I thought was dead. He looked toward Riva and the baby. You made me remember what it means to care again. The next morning they packed what little they had and moved deeper into the canyon, toward the old mining caverns that led to the mountains. The journey was slow, but Ethan didn't rush. Every step felt like the first step of a new life. As they walked, Riva asked softly, When they come again, will you fight? Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe not with guns this time. Then how? By teaching him what we couldn't learn in war. Riva looked down at Tern, who was awake now, staring up at the bright sky with curious eyes. The blue glow had softened, gentle, warm, almost human. Ethan stopped and crouched beside him. You see that, kid? He said quietly, pointing at the horizon. That's your future. You don't have to fight it, just make it better than ours. Tern smiled. A small, innocent smile that made the whole desert feel alive again. That night, they camped at the edge of the canyon. The stars stretched endless above them, cold and beautiful. Ethan sat near the fire, his rifle beside him but untouched. Riva hummed softly, the same lullaby she had sung the first night he met her. He listened quietly, feeling peace settle over him for the first time in years. When she finished the song, she whispered, What will you do now, Ethan Cole? He looked up at the sky where the twin moons shone side by side. Maybe start living instead of hiding, Riva smiled. And if the galaxy comes for us again? Ethan poked at the fire with a stick and said softly, Then we remind them that even after all the wars, all the hate and all the fear, some hearts never die. He looked toward the sleeping child, whose faint blue glow danced like starlight against the sand. They just wait, Ethan whispered, for someone small and innocent to awaken them again. And as the night stretched across the desert, the wind carried Riva's lullaby far into the stars. A song of loss, hope, and a soldier's buried heart finally learning to beat again.